My family forced me to pay $1,800 for a place I didn't live in to support my brother, but when they showed up at my workplace demanding more money, I took a job in another state and vanished without a trace. I'm 29 years old, work in the energy sector, making pretty good money actually. And honestly, I need to tell this story because what happened with my family over the last few months still has me processing everything. Like, when people ask me why I moved so far away or why I don't talk to my parents, I don't even know where to start. You know? Because it sounds so absurd when I say it out loud that people think I'm exaggerating or that there's something more to it, but I swear there's not. It's exactly as crazy as it sounds. I guess I should start by explaining my situation before everything went to hell. I lived in Edmonton, Alberta, in my parents' basement, Sharon and Kevin, and I paid $1,800 a month for that space, which honestly was pretty expensive for a basement, but whatever. It was spacious. I had my own bathroom, my own separate entrance, and the location worked for me because my job requires me to be out of town like half the month, so it made sense not to pay full rent on an apartment that was going to be empty so much of the time. My parents were always the type to charge you rent as soon as you turn 18, which didn't really bother me. Like, I understand you have to contribute and all that. But from the beginning, Sharon was always very clear that I should contribute to the family because, according to her, that's how real families work. My brother Ryan is 3 years older than me. He's married, has 2 kids who are like 6 and 8, I think. And basically, he's always been Sharon's golden child. I mean, it's not that I'm jealous or anything like that, but it's objectively obvious that she treats him differently. She always has. When we were kids, he could do whatever he wanted and I'd get lectured for anything. And as adults, the thing continued the same. Like, he could borrow money from them and never pay it back, and Sharon would say, "Oh well, Ryan has expenses. He has a family," as if I didn't have my own life or my own expenses. You know what I mean? So everything started getting weird like in February of this year. Ryan lost his job, something related to sales. I don't remember exactly what he sold, but basically he got fired, and he and his wife couldn't pay rent on their apartment. I found out because Sharon called me one day, all dramatic, saying that Ryan and his family were going to be homeless, that the kids were going to suffer, that as a family we had to help each other. You know, the whole speech. I told her sure, that maybe I could lend them some money so they could pay a month's rent while Ryan looked for another job. But Sharon said, "No, Nicole, that's not enough. Your brother needs to move back home until he gets stable." And that's where I said, "Wait, hold on. How's that going to work?" Because my parents' house isn't huge, like it has 3 bedrooms upstairs, the main floor with living room and kitchen, and my basement. Sharon explained to me, with a calmness that now seems absolutely surreal to me, that Ryan and his family needed the basement because they were 4 people and needed more space, and that I could use the hobby room that's on the first floor, a space that literally measures like 2 by 3 meters, where Sharon keeps her scrapbooking and knitting stuff. I stayed quiet on the phone for like 10 seconds because I thought she was joking, but no, she was completely serious. I said, "Sharon, that room doesn't even have a closet. A twin bed barely fits in there. Where am I going to put my stuff?" And she told me, "Well, you'll have to get rid of some things or get a storage unit. It's temporary anyway, just until Ryan finds a job." I asked her, "And how long do you estimate that will be?" And she got upset, told me I was being selfish, that Ryan has children to feed and I only worry about myself, that I've always been this selfish since I was a kid. What killed me was that Kevin, my dad, was there in the background saying exactly, "Your brother needs you." And I was thinking like, I also pay rent here. Don't I have a right to my space? But basically they told me I had 2 weeks to vacate the basement. 2 weeks. As if I hadn't been religiously paying $1,800 every month for 3 years. As if the space wasn't legally mine as long as I paid for it. But well, technically there was no written contract or anything because, you know, they were my parents and you trust that family won't do these things to you. So during those 2 weeks I tried to reason with them several times. I proposed paying more rent, like $2,000 or $2,200, to stay in the basement and have Ryan and his family look for another place with that extra money. But Sharon rejected it immediately, saying it wasn't about money, but about family supporting each other. And I thought, but I'm literally offering you more money. How is it not about money? Anyway, I realized there was no way to win that argument, so I started looking for apartments, but everything was super expensive or required year-long leases. And with my work schedule being so irregular, it was complicated to commit to something like that. In the end, I decided I would just move out completely. And during my weeks off from work, I'd stay in hotels or resorts. Like I have the money to do it. And honestly, it sounded better than living in a 2 by 3 meter room, surrounded by constant family drama. I hired a storage unit, moved all my stuff in one weekend, and told Sharon I had already vacated the basement. She acted all surprised, like, "But Nicole, I thought you were going to stay in the hobby room." And I told her, "No, Sharon, that wasn't going to work. I already found another solution." I thought that would be the end of it. You know, me out of the house, them with their space for Ryan, everyone happy. But oh no, things were just getting started. Like a week after I moved out, Sharon called me asking when I was going to deposit the month's rent. I said, "Sorry, what rent? I don't live there anymore." And she said, "But you're still part of this family and your brother needs support. We expect you to continue contributing the $1,800 monthly." I laughed because I thought it was a bad joke. But no, she was serious. I explained to her, trying to stay calm, that it makes no sense for me to pay rent for a place where I don't live. That if they wanted financial support, we could discuss another amount to help with household expenses, while Ryan looked for work, but that $1,800 wasn't going to happen. She got really angry. Told me I was an ungrateful daughter, that after everything they had done for me, raising me, giving me a roof, I was turning my back on them when they needed me most. What blew my mind was that Kevin got on the phone and told me, "Nicole, your brother has 2 more mouths to feed. He needs that money more than you do." And I just thought, but it's my money that I earned. Working? Why is it my responsibility to support Ryan and his family? I didn't say that out loud because I knew it would only make things worse, but basically I told them I'd think about it and hung up. Over the next few days, I received like 20 messages from Sharon, then from Kevin, then from Ryan himself saying I was selfish, that I was abandoning my family, that his kids were going to suffer because of me. Jennifer, my aunt on Sharon's side, also started sending me messages saying she'd heard what was happening and she was very disappointed in me, that family comes first always. Like, the whole extended family suddenly had an opinion about my life and my finances. In the end, because I felt guilty, which now makes me angry at myself, I sent them $500 with a note saying this was to help with groceries and basic expenses, but that I couldn't commit to $1,800 monthly. I thought that would calm things down, at least temporarily. But basically, it was like pouring gasoline on the fire because Sharon took it as confirmation that I could pay and was just being difficult on purpose. Like 2 weeks later, Kevin called me to tell me he had organized a virtual family meeting, that we needed to discuss the situation all together. You know how these things are. Basically, it was an ambush. Like there were about 8 people on the call, including uncles and cousins, and everyone started telling me I had to contribute more, and that Ryan needed support, that the kids needed stability, that I made good money and didn't have children so I should be able to help more. I defended myself as best I could, explained to them that I also have expenses, that I'm paying for the storage unit, that hotels aren't cheap, that I have my own plans and financial goals, but basically they made me feel like the villain of the story. My cousin said something like, "Well, but you chose not to have kids. Ryan does have them, and that's a bigger responsibility." And I thought, what does that have to do with anything? Do I now have to pay for my brother's life decisions? The call ended without any real resolution, just with more pressure on me to do the right thing and support my family. I felt horrible afterward, like questioning myself if I really was being selfish, if I should be doing more. But at the same time, a part of me knew that what they were asking of me was absurd. You know what I mean? Then, like a month after that, I received an email from Kevin. Super formal, like as if it were a legal document or something, where he basically demanded that I cover half of Ryan's mortgage, his previous apartment that he still hadn't been able to finish vacating, or something. I didn't quite understand that part. And also his kids' school tuition at a private school. When I say I almost had a heart attack when I read that, I'm not exaggerating. I literally had to read the email 3 times because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I responded immediately telling him that wasn't going to happen, that I had no legal or moral obligation to pay Ryan's debts or his children's education. And Kevin responded with another even longer email explaining that, as family, we have to support each other in difficult times, that when I was a kid, they paid for my education and my activities, and that now it was my turn to return that support. I told him that's literally what parents are supposed to do. Raise their children, that I didn't ask to be born, and that any expense they made on me was their decision as parents, not a loan I now have to repay. After that email exchange, Jennifer decided to get more actively involved and sent me a super long message, like about 3 pages in Word easily, if you copied it, where she basically gave me a complete sermon about family values, about how previous generations always supported each other, about how I was the black sheep of the family for refusing to help Ryan. And she ended by telling me I should be ashamed of myself and that I was going to regret it when I needed help, and no one was there for me. What I found particularly ridiculous was that Jennifer specifically mentioned that I should contribute for Ryan's kids' soccer and piano classes, like extracurricular activities, as if that was remotely my responsibility. I responded very politely, telling her I appreciated her concern, but my decision was final, and she responded with something like, "Someday you'll understand what family really means." And this is where things got truly crazy, because Sharon suddenly decided it was a good idea to call my workplace. She literally called my company's main office, asked for me, and when they told her I was out in the field, she left a message with the receptionist saying something like, "Tell Nicole her family needs her urgently, that it's a family emergency and she has to call home immediately." The receptionist obviously forwarded the message to me all worried, and when I called back to the office to explain there was no actual emergency, it was super awkward, having to admit it was just my mom being dramatic. I sent Sharon a text message telling her to never call my workplace again, that was completely inappropriate and professionally embarrassing for me, and she responded with something like, "Well, if you answered my calls, I wouldn't have to look for you where I know you'll respond." Kevin sent me another message supporting her, saying, I was avoiding my family and that made me look guilty of something, which made no sense, but whatever. After that, Ryan started his own guilt campaign, sending me Amazon links of things for his kids, like sports shoes, school backpacks, toys, with messages like, "The kids need this, but I can't afford it because I'm supporting the whole family," or, "It would be so easy for you to buy this. It means nothing to you, but means everything to them." It was pure manipulation, and honestly, it made me really angry every time I received one of those messages, but I tried not to respond so as not to feed the drama. What really made me explode was when I received another email from Sharon and Kevin, this time with an Excel spreadsheet attached. Yes, they made a spreadsheet, where they had calculated that I owed $2,000 monthly from now on, plus like $6,000 in back payments, for the months I hadn't contributed since Ryan moved in. In the Excel, they had broken down grocery expenses, utilities, a portion of my parents' mortgage, kids' expenses, everything, and they had unilaterally decided I was responsible for a percentage of all of it. I responded to them, probably more aggressively than I should have been, but I was fed up, telling them they could print that Excel and hang it on their refrigerator as decoration because I wasn't going to pay a cent of that fabricated amount, that they decided to move Ryan and his family into their house without consulting me, and the financial consequences of that decision were theirs, not mine. Kevin responded calling me selfish and telling me I was breaking up the family, and Sharon sent me like 5 voice messages crying saying she couldn't believe her own daughter was so cruel. Then Kevin started what I call his smear campaign, basically calling every uncle, aunt, cousin, any relative he could think of, telling them his version of the story where I was a stingy millionaire who refused to help my poor unemployed brother and his angelic children. Suddenly, I started receiving messages from people I didn't even talk to regularly, all with the same tone of disappointment and judgment, telling me I should reconsider my position, that family is forever. Blah, blah, blah. Ryan also decided to put on his own show on social media, posting vague but obvious things on Facebook about how some people only think about themselves even when their family is suffering, and it's sad when money is more important than blood. His friends commented things like, "Praying for you, brother," and "You know who real people are in difficult times." And although he never mentioned my name directly, I knew several mutual relatives were seeing those posts and knew exactly who he was talking about. What made everything escalate to a completely new level was when my parents started showing up at my apartment unannounced. Yes, because eventually I ended up renting a small studio apartment like in April, because hotels were getting really expensive, and I needed a base even if minimal. The first time they showed up, they knocked on the door like at 8 at night on a Saturday. I had arrived that same day from my work rotation and was exhausted, and when I opened the door, there were Sharon and Kevin with a folder full of papers. Kevin said, "We need to talk about your financial contribution," and they literally tried to enter my apartment to discuss the bills. I told them it wasn't a good time, that I was tired and wasn't going to discuss anything, and Sharon started crying right there in the hallway, saying, "How could I be so cold to my own mother?" The neighbors were obviously listening to everything, and it was super awkward. Finally, I told them to leave or I was going to call building security. And they left, but Sharon yelled at me, "This doesn't end here, Nicole." They came 2 more times unannounced over the following weeks, always with more papers, more bills, more demands. The third time, I didn't even open the door. I just yelled through the door for them to leave, and Kevin started banging on the door, yelling that I was a coward and had to face my responsibilities as an adult. And that time I did call security, and they had to escort them out of the building. What really scared me was when Sharon started contacting my friends. I have like 3 close friends I hang out with regularly, and Sharon somehow got their numbers, probably from my Facebook account that I still hadn't blocked because I didn't think it would go that far, and called each one telling them she was worried about me, that she thought I was having some kind of nervous breakdown, and that if they saw me acting weird to please let her know. My friends obviously told me, and it was so humiliating having to explain the whole situation to them. One of them, Sarah, was so outraged she wanted to call Sharon and tell her to stop harassing. But I asked her not to get involved because I knew it would only make things worse. I asked all 3 of them to block my parents' numbers and not to respond if they tried to contact them in other ways. Ryan intensified his messages too, sending me increasingly aggressive things, like my kids ask me why their aunt doesn't love them, and I hope you can sleep well at night knowing you're ruining innocent children's lives, and mom is sick from the stress you're causing. Her, if something happens to her, it's your fault. Each message was designed to make me feel guilty and horrible. And it worked, if I'm honest. I cried after reading some of them because emotional manipulation is real and hurts, even when you know it's manipulation. The breaking point came when my parents showed up at my work. Yes, at my physical workplace, not the main office, but the site where I was that day supervising some operations. I have no idea how they knew where I'd be that specific day. Maybe they called the office pretending to be family with an emergency or something. But the fact is, they showed up there, at the site, during my work hours, with more papers and demands. It was absolutely mortifying. Like all my coworkers and supervisors saw my parents there causing a scene, Sharon crying and Kevin yelling about family responsibilities, and I had to call site security to escort them out. My supervisor pulled me aside afterward and asked if everything was okay, if I needed some kind of help or support, and I had to explain a condensed version of what was happening. He was professional about it, but I could see on his face he was concerned about whether this was going to affect my work or if there were going to be more incidents. That night, after that disaster at work, I sat in my apartment and really thought about the whole situation. Like I did a complete evaluation of my life and realized this was never going to end, that no matter how much I paid or how much I helped, it would never be enough. There would always be another demand, another expense, another emergency that required my money. I realized they were basically treating me like an ATM, not like a family member, and that the only way out of this was to cut ties completely. It turns out that like 2 months earlier, I had received a job offer in another state, specifically in Texas, for a similar position but with better pay. And at the time, I had turned it down because I thought I didn't want to move so far away and leave everything I knew. I contacted the company that same night asking if the offer was still available, and miraculously they said yes. The position was still open. I accepted almost immediately. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of organizing, packing, ending my apartment lease. Luckily, I had a work transfer clause that let me get out without penalty, selling my furniture, basically preparing my escape because that's how it felt, like a getaway. I didn't tell my parents or Ryan or anyone in my family, just my close friends and some coworkers who had supported me through this whole disaster. The day I left, I sent an email to Sharon, Kevin, Ryan, and Jennifer, copying them all so they couldn't say later I hadn't told them or that I'd disappeared without explanation, telling them I had moved out of state for work, that I wasn't going to share my new address or contact information, that any attempt to contact me would be blocked, and that I hoped Ryan would soon find a job and be able to support his own family because I wasn't going to be available for that ever again. I also told them I didn't hold a grudge, but I needed permanent distance from this toxic dynamic and wished them the best. The responses were exactly what you'd expect. Sharon saying I was a terrible daughter and I was going to regret it. Kevin saying I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Ryan saying I was selfish and his kids were going to grow up not knowing their aunt because of me. Jennifer sending another sermon about family values. I blocked them all after reading those messages and haven't had contact since then. Now, I've been living in Texas for like 4 months, in a city where I know almost no one, starting completely from scratch. And honestly, it's the most liberating decision I've made in my life. I have my own apartment that no one knows about. I work in an environment where no one knows anything about my family drama, and I can breathe without feeling that constant pressure of financial demands and emotional manipulation. I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect or that I don't feel guilty sometimes, because I do feel guilty. Like, I wonder how Ryan's kids are doing, if they managed to stay in their school, if Ryan finally found a job. But then I remind myself that none of that is my responsibility, that I can't sacrifice my life and my mental health for other adults' decisions and problems, even if they're family. Last week, I received a message on LinkedIn, because apparently they didn't think to look for me there, from a cousin asking me to reconsider my position, that the family misses me. But I didn't even respond. I just adjusted my privacy settings so they can't find me so easily. I don't know if someday I'll be able to have any kind of relationship with any of them. Honestly, right now, I can't even imagine under what circumstances that would be possible or healthy. But for now, I'm focused on building my own life here, on my own terms, without the constant shadow of their demands hanging over me.